The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Speaker, I really love the humour that Mr Jamie Lee Ross uses when he makes his contribution to the House, as he praised the Minister of Finance for his competent financial management of the books. 7 years, 7 deficits. 7 years, 7 deficits. That's what Bill English has delivered to us. Bill English has borrowed more money than Sir Robert Muldoon.
Amazing.
Bill English has borrowed more money than Sir Robert Muldoon. 7 budgets, 7 deficits, and Jamie Lee Ross thinks that's something to boast about. Well, I would hang my head in shame if I was the whip of the National Party and looked at the tragedy that Bill English has delivered for the finances of our country. I heard the Minister for Senior Citizens, another person who's obviously prone to irony and humour in her debate. Let me tell the House about a few policy issues for senior citizens. What about increasing the level of superannuation, which was hacked back under a national government in the 1990s? What about establishing a New Zealand superannuation fund that the government would invest in so that older people in the future, young ones of today, older people in the future, would have some security that the increased demands of superannuation would be met? Saving for the future in a New Zealand superannuation fund. What about introducing income-related rents for state housing, so that people who are on low income pay a lower level of rent and can afford to have a bit of money in their pocket instead of it all going out on the rent? What about having a rates rebate, so that people on low incomes who had a high bill every year, you can't get out of it, you get your rates bill, haven't got very much money if you're on superannuation, a big bill. How about a rates rebate so that you could have a little more of that money back in your own pocket? What about the removal of asset testing for rest homes? Those are all policies that were progressed by Labor when we were last in government. Now let's compare that against the most recent announcement of the Minister for Senior Citizens, standing alongside the Prime Minister. The Minister for Senior Citizens announced, drum roll, the launching of a website. Wow, the launching of a website. That will give older New Zealanders financial security. That will help them with the level of superannuation. That will give the young people of today security, knowing that that New Zealand superannuation fund will be there in the future. Not only did that minister launch a website, but simultaneously, as only the Prime Minister can do, they cut home support for older New Zealanders. At the same time, it's almost like a magic trick. They can launch a website and cut home support for senior citizens at the same time. That's what older New Zealanders are facing under this government. And Nikki Kay, the current member for Auckland Central, in what sounded like a valedictory speech, said how proud she was of the achievements that had been brought forward by the national government, not for older New Zealanders, not for young New Zealanders, in fact, not for very many people at all. If Bill English had invested in the New Zealand Superannuation Fund, as he should have from 2009, instead of borrowing for tax cuts, which is what he actually did, wouldn't borrow to save for future New Zealanders' security, but he'd borrow for tax cuts for the highest income New Zealanders. The highest income New Zealanders got tax cuts in 2009 that Bill English borrowed money to pay for. That is a disgrace. If he hadn't done that, if he had invested in the New Zealand Superannuation Fund, we would have been $18.2 billion better off. That superannuation fund would have been $18.2 billion bigger. $18.2 billion bigger if we had had that investment over the last 7 years. And even if you take the most conservative approach of allowing for borrowing and the costs, we would still be $6.2 billion better off. That's money for future New Zealanders to have security in their quality life, and it's money that the Minister of Finance spent on tax cuts for the rich people instead.
Kanwal Singh Bakshi.